actually hosting the panel. I haven't just walked on stage. So, my name is Ross Kingsland, and I work with Fast Company, and I'm also the CEO and founder of Inception Growth, a growth hacking company. But what we're here today is to talk about specifically hiring for the next generation. So I thought it'd be quite good if we start just quickly introducing yourselves and just give like a very, very short overview of exactly what your company does.
Sure. Hi Ross. Hi everyone. Happy to be here in Dublin. I'm the CEO of a company called Upwork, which is kind of a new name for two older companies that have merged recently. One was a company called Elance. The other one was a company called Odesk, both based in San Francisco in the Bay Area. And what we do is we're a marketplace for freelance work. And what that means concretely is we help companies like yourselves, early stage startups, later stage startups, and bigger companies to hire talent around the world. So we help you find your first engineers, we help you find your salespeople, we help you build your multilingual call center, translate your website, write your blog, all of that good stuff.
Brilliant. Andrew.
Hey everybody, my name is Andrew Filev. I'm from a company called Rike. The reason I'm here is I think we do a pretty good job of hiring people through the world. Our headquarters is in the Bay Area. We were named the best place to work there by a couple of different outlets. We recently opened an office in Dublin just a couple of months ago and already have 15 folks there, people joining from companies like Salesforce and Google and Oracle. So have a pretty good success hiring globally, and wanted to share kind of a couple of tips of what worked and what didn't work for us.
Brilliant. So one of the biggest problems, I suppose, at the very beginning, or particularly around up to seed funding stage, is hiring, but not just hiring the right people, and is definitely a problem we've all experienced. I'm just interested in, perhaps Andrew, just starting with yourself, about how did you hire and recruit the initial team that started with yourself?
So it's kind of interesting when you hire. There are two almost opposite trends that you look for in the people. One is cohesion. You want your team to really glue together and work well, and another one is actually kind of the diversity. Because if you've got people from different backgrounds, sort of this melting pot of ideas become sort of the outcome of that is a better result. So, and I think in their early days, they kind of almost pivot. When you just start, you're looking for a co-founder. I think the cohesion is super important. Think of it as sort of a Larry Page and Sergey Brin, right? Very sort of similar types. But then very quickly, you should almost pivot from that and try to hire for somebody who would complement you in the areas that you're weaker. And I think there's a great saying, I don't know who first came up with it, very easy to memorize, very hard to internalize, is that you should really focus on hiring people that are better than you at the jobs that you hire them for. And again, this sounds obvious, but if you see this in action, it's amazing. Like I've hired some people where it's almost like watching a movie. You can sit back and relax, and you can kind of like enjoy what's happening on the silver screen, right? Like they're so good at their job. So and then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So kind of a positive feedback loop. You hire the right folks, and they set the right culture, and that helps you kind of spread and grow exponentially.
And one of the things I've used, particularly at the beginning with a fledgling company, we're just starting it out, and particularly when you're using almost doing a lean startup approach, hiring in people for short-term contracts can be very useful as well while you're testing. I just wondered how Upwork was starting to develop that further.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, typically people use us for one of three reasons. One is you're in a place where there's just not a ton of local talent. You're for whatever reason you're in a place you're looking for engineers. There's just no engineers around, so you're gonna have to find them somewhere else. Another case which happens a lot with tech companies in the Bay Area is there's tons of engineers, but there's even more companies that are looking for those engineers, and the local unemployment rate is like negative 50% or something, and it's incredibly hard for a young company like some of you guys to actually attract really the top talent when you're competing against Facebook, Google, and Twitter. And then the third one is the one you just mentioned, which is you don't quite know exactly where you're trying to go yet. and you can't necessarily commit yourself. Maybe you don't even have the funding to commit yourself to hiring full-time people. And the ability to hire people on a flexible, part-time, short engagement to build that MVP, show it to a few customers, pitch a few investors, and then potentially start hiring local engineers after a while also helps a lot. And you see this not just when you're getting started, but as you continue to innovate, you'll always have this incubation, R&D type of lab that's focusing on the next big thing for your company. And there again, the flexibility of hiring people extremely fast, finding the best talent all around the world, and assembling these kind of specialized teams of exceptional talent that you couldn't possibly recruit as full-time employees helps a lot.
I think that's a really good, really interesting point, that a lot of people think just because you're in a vicinity, naturally the best person for building up your social brand or increasing your UX or your customer engagement or whatever it is, just happens to be sat around you, isn't it? And it's the best people that are going to fit with the team and the culture and the vision are not necessarily, are going to be spread out, diversified across the world. So it's quite difficult, I think, probably getting those initial people. You've just opened an office here in Dublin, though, Andrew, right? So just kind of take us through the process of how you actually did that in a new city, which you haven't previously you didn't have a presence in.
So there's a little bit of math and a little bit of art in that. So the math is you obviously look at different cities and try to figure out what makes most sense from the talent pool. The art is that I actually was here earlier this year, spoke at a Google conference, and just fell in love with the city and kind of and with the people as well. As an entrepreneur, there's a lot of entrepreneurial spirit around here, and it kind of appeals to me. A lot of people, and this helps in the recruiting as well in the early stages, because we had amazing success bringing people from, again, here locally, from companies like Salesforce and Oracle. And part of the reason is kind of the entrepreneurial nature of local talent. And this goes back to a bigger point about kind of the fact that it's hard to recruit. I can tell you it is hard, and it will always be hard. Because if you're looking for the best ever people, the best talent, by definition, that's always going to be a challenge, right? At every stage of the company. The trick there is to use what you have. And I personally train in jiu-jitsu, and in jiu-jitsu, you never try to apply strength against strength, right? So same with recruiting. You don't go against somebody like Google trying to beat them on their home turf. What you have is what they don't have and never will have again, is you're a startup. You got this spirit, the sense of a kind of a family camaraderie, ability to create something from scratch and do it really fast and have a huge impact on the company and the world. None of these huge companies have that, but you do. And so, for example, when we opened our Dublin office, that's part of our appeal in the pitch. You could join the office and you could be kind of in this early crew that establishes the local culture, that builds it yourself, and you get both the support of a bigger brand, but you also have a lot of sort of entrepreneurial flexibility. So that's one thing that helped us a lot. And one of the metaphors that I like to use is kind of it's like a baby, where every age is a fun age. When they're 1 year old, they're fun. When they're 7-year-old, they're fun. When they're 15, they're supposedly fun as well. So kind of same is true for the company. Just make sure you understand what your competitive advantages and apply it. So that's one. And the second, which finally is also kind of reinforced by jiu-jitsu, is kind of you just have to have the tenacity, right? It's never going to be easy, and I think you need to internalize it as a huge priority and be ready to invest a lot of time and a lot of mental energy into that. So a couple of metrics on Dublin. To make our first initial 10 hires, I'll go the reverse through the funnel. To make the first initial 10 hires, we had 15-person interviews. To get to that, we had 250 phone interviews. And to get to that, we had 3,500 sort of applicants, both inbound and outbound, that we sourced. So it takes a lot of tenacity to find the right people, and you need to make it a priority for yourself as a founder and CEO. And to me, it doesn't stop. It's not about, hey, we're just starting and that's a priority right now. It's still the recruiting and hiring, takes over my calendar no matter what. Maybe sort of a board meeting will take a precedence over that. But then, other than that, more often than not, I kind of reshuffle and push everything just to make sure that if there's the right person, I'll meet with them, I'll give them my full attention and presence, and kind of will try to make the right decision for the person, for the company.
And I think that some of the feedback when I was asking some of my audience on Twitter was they really like the idea of virtual teams. But one of the biggest difficulties that they seem to have is how to manage them. And obviously, with Upwork, that's the core essence of how do you manage a remote team very well. I was just wondering if you could give perhaps a couple of tips that would work.
I think the first thing is, we wrote a book on this. So if you guys are interested, you can download it online. It's a little bit hard to answer the question in just like 2 minutes.
That's not a plug.
But I think probably if there's one tip is to consider your virtual team to be an integral part of your team. If you treat your freelancers or your offshore workers like an outsourcing center, then you're never going to build a relationship. You'll never hire the right people in the first place, and you're not going to get the best out of them. If you treat them as core team members and you actually spend the time to even over-communicate, the fact that people are remote makes it harder for them. They don't get access to the coffee machine and hanging out with your local team. So you actually need to reach out even more to them. Spend even more time when you're doing the recruiting, Andrew was talking about recruiting for talent, but also recruiting for culture. You want people that are going to be working from, Russia, Greece, China, whatever. You want these guys to really love what it is that you do because they're going to be on their own most of the day. And so you need to really, do these interviews, making sure that the person is not just technically qualified to do the job, but is also extremely interested in what you do and really committed to making it work. And then you need to keep them in the loop. It's not rocket science at the end of the day. There's tons of tools to do this. There's free video conferencing from Google Hangout to Skype. We have our own chat tool internally within the system. But it is really a lot about making people feel like they're part of the team and making sure to communicate with them really frequently. And I would say the other thing is even more so than with a local team is really hire the best of the best. The beautiful thing once your span of recruiting is no longer 10 miles or 10 kilometers, I guess I would say here, but it's actually the entire world. You really have a choice. You really are in a position where you can truly recruit top talent, and so you should never compromise. Yes, top talent is more expensive. What you'd find in a marketplace like us, it's pretty efficient. You find people at $100 an hour, and you find people at $10 an hour, and there's a reason why there are different rates. But you can afford it, and you really, especially your first few employees, you really want to hit high. There's a saying in the Valley, to your point, A players tend to attract A players, B players tend to attract C players, meaning it goes downhill pretty quickly if you compromise early on.
And that's...
Yeah, so a couple of tips from me. Can you hear me? Okay, so a couple of tips from me there. One is, as a kid, I used to play chess, and when it comes to remote collaboration, I like that metaphor because you have to, if somebody is working in a different time zone, different office, you kind of almost have to predict how they would respond to your communication and try to prevent that by providing them the context, right? So it's not just about, you shouldn't be tasking people to do things, you should give them the context of what is the goal, why are we doing that? So if you're asleep and they're working, they have to kind of try to make them think like you in that sense, so they understand the reasons, not just sort of executing the task. So that helps a lot. Otherwise, you get into this weird situation where you ask somebody to do something, you're asleep, they have a question, they shoot the question back, and everybody's annoyed and frustrated. So kind of over-communicate and try to think ahead. So that's one thing. And another thing, this goes back to kind of our company. We do work collaboration and work management solution, and our team lives in our own product. It's all about the transparency when it comes to remote teams. You got to make sure that everybody is on the same page. How you do it, it's kind of up to you. You can have our Google Hangouts running in the background. You could have old meetings. You could have running chats. You can use systems like Rike, but you need to make sure that people understand what are the most important things that we're working on. Kind of what's the sprint, what's the backlog. They need to understand the progress in the real time. We're no longer in the age of hey, two-year work cycles. We're in the age where you got sort of weekly sprints and that you have to sort of work in real time through your whole team. So make sure if you're using remote teams, distributed teams, make sure that everybody is on the same page, no matter which tool you guys choose to do that.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. What we've been asked is if anyone actually wants to take the opportunity to ask these two gentlemen a question now. We've got a roaming mic.
We have time for one. So I have a roaming mic. It is soft, so if I throw it at you, it will not hurt you. We have a question for these guys on the stage. It is a microphone. I know you're looking at me very strangely, but it is a microphone. Here we go. So you're talking to the top there.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
We're building a virtual team with my company, and we have investment. We're building some virtual schools, so it's distributed. Can you give us examples of companies that you've seen who've been very successful building virtual teams?
I think we're one of them. So our company has 1,000 people in it, 300 employees based in California, 2 offices, one in San Francisco, the other one in the South Bay in Mountain View, and 700 freelancers that are based in 60 different countries. But we're not the only ones. GitHub, 70% of the workforce is remote. Mozilla, huge part of the workforce is remote. Automatic, which is the company behind WordPress, until very recently did not even have an office. I think the Basecamp team is still almost completely remote. They actually wrote a book about it recently called Remote. I think what you find is a lot of companies that came from the open source community are fully distributed because the open source communities that they were born out of tend to be fully distributed. And I think that one of the ways that new startups are really embracing this whole virtual team movement is because a lot of the founders and a lot of the early developers that you hire are themselves really engaged in open source software, and they've seen it work. Like if you've worked on any one of the big open source platforms, you've realized, hey, I'm working with people all around the world. We're working 24/7. Communication works, culture works. We're building really great software. We can do this commercially. We don't have to do this just purely on a voluntary basis.
Andrew, do you have anything to add?
No, actually, I had the same example. So I think in open source community, it's very popular. It's how a lot of those companies emerge. So by definition, they're very sort of distributed friendly.
Sorry, just a very quick B question. Is there somewhere where I can find the best tools for creating and helping virtual teams?
So at the risk of complete self-promotion, so you should be using his product for collaboration, but we did write a book. It's called Hire Fast and Build Things. It's available pretty much for free on our website, or you can buy it for like $2 on Amazon, and it's like a 100-page document that talks about how we built our own company, how some of the other companies I'm mentioning build their own company, best practices, things we've learned over the years. We've been doing this for 15 years. So we've learned a lot about what works and what doesn't, and we try to capture it in one single document. So I encourage you to read it.
Very good. I just want to just very quickly thank both our guests for speaking today. Hope you got a lot from it, and don't underestimate how important hiring good talent is. Just welcoming and joining and thanking the panel.